This podcast is made possible by Planful. Inside the financial planning and analysis realm, long days often turn into long weeks as financial professionals pursue moments of strategic insight. On today's show, we'll be featuring the FP&A insights and commentary of 4 finance leaders, including CFO Evan Goldstein of Seismic, CFO Amberine Tabasi of Airtable, and CFO Anat Ashkenazi of Eli Lilly. We begin after this. Hi, it's Jack Sweeney. I just wanted to include a short preface here regarding the passing of Steve Player, a prominent consultant and thought leader in the FP&A world, and of course, our co-host and friend. We'll be posting a tribute to Steve here later this month. It'll be an episode of Planning Aces. Planning Aces is a name that Steve coined for us. The episode will exclusively spotlight some of his wonderful commentary and thinking over the past 18 months. Our plan would be to release the tribute to Steve the last week of the year, a time when many of us think about how fortunate we are, and we likely think back, counting our blessings, and think about the people who made a difference in our lives. For me, Steve Player can be counted among them. So thank you, Steve. In the meantime, and starting next year, we'll be having a number of guest hosts participating with us. And Glenn Hopper, CFO of Sandline Global and author of Deep Finance, agreed on very short notice to step in as our guest host for today's episode, and we greatly appreciate his willingness to help us out. Planning Aces episode number 18 begins after this. With so much change around us and your need for increasing agility, you have to equip your team to win, and you have to do it now. Join over 1,300 companies of all sizes using Planful to help plan and execute with greater confidence. Planful integrates your critical financial processes to serve the data you need, insights you demand, and the answers necessary to manage your business optimally. Planful lets you plan better, close faster, and report more accurately. And Planful's not just for finance and accounting. It's for the entire business to plan, collaborate, and drive increased financial performance. Take full control of how you administer and manage all of your financial processes and data, and put finance first collaboration at the heart of every decision. When finance is a team sport, you can be a champion. With Planful, you'll be a champion of finance. Get in the game by going to planful.com to learn more. Hi, it's Jack, and I'm here with Glenn Hopper, who some of you might recall. He joined us last summer on an episode. He's the CFO of Sandline Global and author of Deep Finance, a book he had written and published recently, so we thought he'd be an excellent guest host for us. Glenn, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, Jack, thank you so much for having me on. I've got to just lead with saying I really appreciate it, and I know I have some really big shoes to fill today, following behind Steve. And I was really sorry to hear of his passing, and I'll try to at least represent on some level what he did. I know he's an irreplaceable as part of the show.
Well, thank you again, Glenn, for stepping in. Now, you sent me an interesting article regarding FTX, the cryptocurrency exchange company that's collapsed and has just grabbed business headlines for the last few weeks. The company's bankruptcy filing, it was filed by the new CEO, John Ray, who they had appointed, and he stepped in to oversee the bankruptcy and all the items that came to light there.
Yeah, I've never been a crypto guy, so like the last thing I want to do is get into the sort of the Byzantine world or of the merits or lack thereof of cryptocurrency. I mean, but this is just from an egregious tale of excess. I mean, the implosion of this company. I mean, if this doesn't scream height of a bubble, I don't know what does. It makes me think of the collapse of, like the South Sea bubble or even the .com bubble, where just speculators are running amok and just lose all controls. And these are smart people that invest in this. We got massive venture firms coming in and just giving this Sam Bankman-Fried guy just carte blanche with no real oversight or board of directors. And then when you have someone like John Ray come in, who's been doing these restructurings for 40 years, this is the guy who led Enron out of bankruptcy, and he said, that he'd never before seen such a complete failure of corporate controls. And the one that really jumped out at me, the article just, and I think we're just uncovering the very top of this. It's gonna go so deep, and it's gonna be so absurd. But things like the company buying it was something like $120 million worth of private homes for the employees and their families, and just giving them to the employees in the Bahamas just in their name. And just I think that the one of the ones that really stood out was the part in the story that said emojis for expenses. So there's no expense reports. It's just a communication, I guess, in Slack or whatever, and they have a color coded emoji to say that it's approved. And it's just, that's a small part of the hundreds of millions or billions of dollars that they wasted, but it speaks to just the complete just lack of oversight, and just basically all these executives just using the investors' money as their till, and just no controls or anything in place. It just, what an amazing thing to allow to happen. And you want to say, oh well, it's easy to see all that in hindsight, but if anyone had even peeked under the hood of this thing in the middle of it, this is all stuff that could have been caught while they were spending the investors' money. It's amazing that just lack of oversight was allowed to continue. And of course it blew up. And especially when the foundation is built on something as unstable as cryptocurrency.
Yeah. And just reading here from the story you shared, the losses for investors may reach as high as 8 billion, but with non-existent or deficient accounting, auditing, and disbursement systems, it'll take Ray and his forensic investigators some time to uncover the truth, without a doubt. But Sam Bankman-Fried, for those of us who don't know by now, it's 30 years of age, built a $32 billion company on crypto, and did it in such a short span of time. When you look back over the time frame it was erected, one has to wonder how he could have possibly put in all the processes that a company such as this would require. Uh, there weren't any. Now we understand. Just the interesting role that John Ray plays, which I didn't know this, but he before he steps into Enron, sort of after the collapse there, and helps with that bankruptcy. He There was a major bankruptcy around Fruit of the Loom, which happened ages ago, but it made quite a few headlines at the time as well. But that's sort of where I think he got his credentials for playing this unique role. But to step into it and then take a look around at FTX and have him say what he did is just so startling. But let's get rolling here. I know you were pleased to learn, Glenn, that we were going to be featuring CFO Amberine Tabasi of Airtable. We haven't been hesitant to highlight Amberine's thinking since we posted her episode, which was back at number 846. We've continued to go back to it. As our listeners know, I am routinely asking finance leaders whether there's a new business dynamic that they've begun to measure, given the amounts of data that have become available to them. Could they share with us a new KPI, or, and into that, in response to that line of questioning, Amberine takes a step back and instead provides us with this wonderful overview of the approach Airtable is taking with data and data integrity, and her word, legibility. Um, but anyway, this is Amberine Tabasi, CFO of Airtable.
Yeah. So our priority as a company is to grow efficiently. And so to grow efficiently, we spend actually a lot of time over the last 2 years building what I would call legibility around the business. And that means identifying the most important metrics, defining those metrics, and then ensuring that you capture data on those metrics correctly and consistently. And candidly, that sounds much easier than it is in a hyper growth stage company because we had been through, prior to my arriving, the company had been through just a tremendous growth spurt when it came to the business itself. And so, like the processes and the functions and the data scaffolding was catching up with this business that was just racing ahead and growing really fast. And so candidly, it's taken us about, a year plus just to build that legibility and make sure that every part of the company is using the same definition when it comes to a metric. And that if we walk around the company, mostly virtually today, and ask someone a question, anyone you ask in any function will give you the same answer if you ask them, for example, what is our net dollar retention or what is our ARR? And so building that legibility has been a really big focus. The great thing is now that we have that legibility, we can start identifying the levers that really will create the most amount of growth. We can identify the levers that will do it most efficiently. And it's interesting, we officially started a program a year and a half ago called Levers and Legibility because we knew we wanted to do this work. And in retrospect, I wish we had called it Legibility and Levers because it turns out before you can get to identifying levers and moving things and changing things, you need to make sure that the data itself is incredibly accurate, consistent, correct, and well thought through. And so if I did it again, I would call it Legibility and Levers. But it has been a big investment of time and a really powerful, effective, productive. Like I couldn't be more happy with the amount of time we spent on that.
Yes, Amberine Tabasi talking about that time investment. Was it worth it? Absolutely, she says. Glenn, what did you make of what Amberine shared?
Yeah. So first off, I've got to say I love Airtable and I loved this whole episode. For someone like me, I mean, Airtable is to me basically a drag and drop database, and I've spent most of my career in small companies where we don't have these huge teams and we don't have the technical resources, and I'm personally, like if I had to write a SQL query, it's a nightmare. I can do it over time, but I would prefer not to. So just Airtable as a great product is something that I've used over the years. So it was really interesting to get this kind of peek behind the curtains on this episode. But yeah, and to her point on the lexicon, I mean, having the legibility around the business. I mean, yes, absolutely. I mean, all the more CFOs I talk to, we're all trying to do that. And I'd love to hear another CFO focused so clearly on this endeavor, and especially one that while you're in a hyper growth mode, because every business tries to have KPIs. Some do it more effectively than others. And they're more than just a report card. Everyone in the company has to know what these KPIs mean, and otherwise, what's their value? If you don't have everyone in the company speaking the same language, then it's the numbers that are being reported are meaningless. It's like when I'm watching the weather and the weather guy gets into barometric pressure.
That's it. That's exactly it. The guy, the weatherman with his barometric readings. What percentage of the audience really appreciates all of what's being shared there? Similarly, the finance executive with their KPIs or their measurements, what percent of the organization is really going to understand what it means? Really, and I like her legibility and levers. That's the title of this episode. I'm telling you right now.
So this is the legibility is really interesting to me, and I've got kind of extreme anecdote here from my personal experience, and it's um, when you're just throwing out these numbers, they don't mean anything. You could have a dashboard that everybody sees, but it's like driving by billboards on the interstate. You can just start glossing over it and you don't know. And then tying what those metrics are to levers that you can actually create action from is really important. It reminded me a lot of one of my previous stints. I was CFO for an investor-backed retail operation. It was actually car washes, and we knew from the beginning that we were going to build this business to sell. And so you have to have very tight financial metrics. And in order to hit these kind of aggressive goals we had, not just for growth, but for our EBITDA margin and for our, wash volume and average price per car wash and, spend by customer, you had to have everybody speak in the same language. So we had the car wash managers. These aren't business school people. It's blue collar work and it's hard work. It's mechanic, plumbing, electrical, and customer service. It's a real skill set, but these are not the kind of people that are spending all day looking at spreadsheets and running VLOOKUPs and all that. They don't, their default would be you show them financials and they start glazing over thinking about the real work that they have to do. But because we wanted to motivate them and have everybody on the same page, we would bonus them, and the profit sharing plan was all based on their financial performance. So here I am, a finance guy, showing up at the car wash on a cold Tuesday in February with my financial statements and ring binders and all that. And I would sit down with them and we would walk through their P&L, and there were certain things they were bonused on. And first it was, what is a P&L? And then, what is a cost of goods sold? What are these expenses? But after doing this a couple months, we, with each of them, and they would see how their performance would impact their budget, they knew which levers to pull, and they knew what their utility expense was supposed to be and what their ratios, and what their soap chemical expenses were supposed to be. And I swear after 3 or 4 months with doing this with the managers, you would walk in and I would think I was talking to like a Goldman Sachs analyst, the way we would break down these P&Ls. And it worked really, really well. When we sold that business, we had a 63% EBITDA margin at the unit level. It was firing on all cylinders, and we could not have done it if we didn't have this lexicon and everybody understanding and speaking the same thing, and the managers were competitive against each other on it and everything. It was amazing. And that's, in my entire career, that was the best buy-in company-wide that I've ever seen. And it's all because we spoke the same language and we knew which levers to pull.
Well, to your earlier point, don't go around sharing your barometric readings to achieve buy-in. Buy-in is actually another line of questioning that I have. I'm frequently asking finance leaders to tell us about how they were able to educate part of the organization or an area of the business via a metric, bring it to their attention, have them better understand why it matters. And here again, our next planning ace, the CFO, Anat Ashkenazi of Eli Lilly. It's obvious that she's made buy-in and a common lexicon a priority as well. Here's Anat Ashkenazi.
If I had a quick anecdote, I would tell you we would have acted on it immediately. When we see something that we think is meaningful, then we try to deliver it. Now, it does take time. So, one of the things that I find helpful is how do you integrate the financial data I mentioned earlier is kind of at our fingertips today. It's easier to extract the data. How do we combine commercial data? So what the reps are doing, for example, in the field into that data set. So we see the entire company in one dashboard. So I'll give you an example. You walk into a manufacturing site, one of our newer manufacturing site, and you may have this huge monitor walking in that shows you production and maybe where issues are or, how fast things are going. And that's incredibly important for a site head right now. Obviously, they don't need to just look at that monitor. They have that information, but it's just kind of an illustration of how do you get that one dashboard so quickly what to look at, or if something happens or if something is derailed. it's easier to look at lagging metrics, which we all do, and sales metrics is a lagging metric, right? What we saw today is a lagging metric. It's not a leading metric. So my focus now is shifting to what are those leading indicators that I want to integrate more into decision making, because then you truly can make much more informed decisions. So for example, for sales, we look at a metric called new to brand prescription. And it's a leading indicator for how much we're going to sell in the future, because these are new patients getting on drug for the first time. That's a good leading indicator. It's partially automated. It'd probably be good to integrate it more, but now we're using it as a predictive tool. And when we use it as a predictive tool, it not just informs our, my targets for the year or guidance that we set out in terms of what the revenue will be. It informs our manufacturing organization of what they would need to produce and how much we need to scale up. And obviously you want to do it ahead of time. But these are some of the few examples that, where we would look for more leading indicator, not just relying on lagging indicators.
Well, she really does boil things down for us so nicely. Um, Again, we spent a good deal of time talking about the forward-looking finance function versus the backward-looking finance function, and this transformation that's happening over time. But it really does all begin with this shift from lagging indicators to leading indicators that's been going on, stating the obvious here. But Glenn, what did you take away?
Oh, a lot. This was another great interview. The whole time, well, first off, this leading versus lagging indicators, that's the real science of business analysis, of business analytics. Finding these correlations between not just what's happening internally in the company, but external factors, and being able to say, this is happening now, and that's going to drive what's happening in the future. Versus when you're doing your analysis of what happened in the past, and this is ways that you can make your forecast and models more accurate and more predictive. But the whole time she was talking about it, I was thinking about the stages of business analytics for a company. So 4 stages here is, and you have to be able to evolve to them to really make an impact in the finance world. So the first stage is descriptive analytics. And that's where, okay, this is the data we have. This is what we know. What's before is this is more lagging indicator. We know this happened. Gas prices went up last quarter, which impacted retail sales. Yep, we get all that. And that's just describing our data that happened. And it's kind of what you would do on an investor call where you're explaining, well, sales were down. This is why. And it's just describing what you have, what data you have and what it means. Well, the next phase is diagnostic, and that's saying, okay, well, these things happened, and we know that we found a correlation, and let's keep finding more correlations, not just between internal, but also what are some external factors that drive our business. And we're really diagnosing the data that we have. And once you do that, that's when you can move towards these, from the lagging to the leading indicators. And you've got these, that's where you can do predictive analytics. And once you find that correlation, you say, well, now I'm watching, in my previous example, gas prices go up. That means there's fewer retail dollars, means, whatever. Once you find whatever that correlation is, you can say, oh, well, now we're going to tune our model because this is happening and we can react accordingly. And then the holy grail of all that is prescriptive analytics. And that's where you say, not just, okay, this happened, so that the correlation is going to be this, and here's going to be the result, but here's something we can do to offset that or to enhance that or whatever it is. So just going through that descriptive, diagnostic, predictive, and prescriptive, once you get to that, you are fine-tuned. And that's when in finance, you've increased your value tenfold to the rest of the company, because it's like you've broken out the crystal ball.
And For most companies, where are they on that journey, though? And again, it varies such a great deal, I would imagine, from one industry to the next. The high tech guys are pretty sophisticated. They have more, perhaps, data clarity than others. I don't know. Any sense of that? Where and why companies vary on the journey?
Yeah, I mean it's whether you're tech or not. If you once you have the resources and have the, small companies can be struggling just to even harness the data that is available to them, and that's just internal data, let alone trying to, if you don't have headcount for it, it's very hard to try to pull in this external information, try to look at anything other than just what's right in front of you. So that's and the sad thing is these are the companies that are going to get left behind because you just can't compete with a company that's doing that much better. That is that much further along in their data journey. So it's very difficult, and I think that I consider those companies are run by hunches and experience, and by the companies that have all this data can say, I have this hunch, let's make it a hypothesis and test it. And they can make more scientific and data-driven decisions. But if you're struggling to just do the basic accounting functions and get your books closed quarterly or monthly or whatever your process is, it's very hard to find the resources and the time to do this. So I would say, there are companies, and I like to think that I've been a part of them, that are doing under 50 million a year in revenue and can find ways to sort of cobble this together. But I'm always envious of the larger companies who've got the real data teams and don't just have someone like me and a couple of other analysts trying to be part-time data engineers.
Well, they know the threat is out there, though. For so many mid-sized firms, I would think, that have been around a while, they have begun dedicating more resources to this because of the threat of disruptors or attackers. Now, our next planning ace is another someone we've gone back to a number of times already, but it's Evan Goldstein, CFO of Seismix. First time on Planning Ace, I'll add, but we've also featured Evan on Workplace Champions. But Evan has this remarkable career journey that takes place 10 years at Genentech. He leaves Genentech. He joins Salesforce and spends 11 years there. And he's in more senior roles at Salesforce. And what he is about to relate in this clip is what he discovers upon his arrival as far as strategic planning is concerned. And it's just a great chapter. It's what made this a standout episode for us. So we're really thankful he did share it. And again, this is Evan Goldstein, CFO of Seismic.
Yeah, for me, it was about the time that I took over the long range planning process at Salesforce. And just as some context, prior to that, Salesforce was really in a stage of rapid growth. We were evolving from a single product, single geo to a multi SKU global company. It was a really transition point. And up until that time, the long range plan was sort of a finance skunkworks project. It was this big, heavy duty model that, a couple of people in the corner of the finance floor of our building in downtown San Francisco managed. It wasn't business owned. And when the leader left and I took over this, all the business folks walked away from the model. Like, that's not those numbers. That's the finance model. That's the finance LRP. It's not my numbers. And it made me quickly realize the importance, again, going back to some of those early lessons I shared about Genentech, the importance of the business and engaging with the business. The importance that the long range plan is not just a model. A model is the output. It's a framework of how to have a conversation. But really, it's about the strategic alignment of your go-to-market organization, your product organization, and operations. And operations can be anything from tech delivery to recruiting to finance, all of those things. And it's really about, at the very top of the organization, being aligned on where we're going over the next 2 to 5 years, or sometimes longer. Genentech had very long LRPs that were greater than 10 years because of the nature of that business. But in technology, call it 2 to 5, depending where you are. And for me, that was when I took that over, that was sort of my goal. I didn't want this to be a finance exercise. It needed to be a company exercise. And how I was able to do that was really partnership in the organization. I reached out to the head of sales strategy at the time and I said, hey, do you have a need for a long range plan? Would a long range plan help you in running your business? And he's like, absolutely. This is the thing I need. Every year, I sort of start over with territory carving and quotas. It'd be great to know, like, okay, what geos are going to be focal points? What product selling are going to be focal points? And he's like, okay, this will be really helpful. So we were, he joined me on this sort of LRP journey. And then he challenged me and he's like, you know what? I think we really need a product person. And so we reached out to the head of product strategy. And we had all worked together before and we knew each other really well. But really, this is the first time we had come together as sort of a collective to make something that was company driven in this level. And so the product strategy, what's the product roadmap? How do we align product and sales strategy and all those things? Because when you're in a really fast growing company, it is incredibly natural to have silos. It is perfectly normal. And it's really, in many ways, how do you connect? How do you build that connective tissue? And I view the LRP as doing that. And the teams came together and we built out a process, a multi-month process where we start with the top line, then we go into resource allocation, and the final output is a model. But what I was most pleased with about that are the decisions that we made that came out of that long-range planning. Whether it was data center locations, right, as we saw businesses grow in certain areas, and getting our chief revenue officer aligned with our chief technology officer on where we should make those bets, or whether it was a decision to move into a new market, a new product that we thought had a ton of upside and opportunity. And that product ended up being one of the fastest growing businesses in Salesforce's history, right? It's one of a great success story. That is the strategic moment for finance, right? It's evolving us from the number crunchers, the budget managers, to enabling the company to make really effective decisions. And, finance is not alone in that. Like I said, I had partners in that journey, but it was a great, great success. Now, it's not to say that it wasn't without faults. We had bumps during that process. But again, going back to what motivates me to stay at a company, do we have innovation? And every year we evolve that long-range planning process. We did surveys afterwards, what worked, what didn't work. How do we evolve that next? What piece of information would our executives like to have gleaned from that? And so we just kept evolving that. And, when it was under my ownership, I probably did it for about 5 years. And every year it was slightly different, slightly improved. And that's the goal, right? To constantly help the company make effective decisions. And so definitely one of my proudest achievements and one of where I saw the use case of where finance can really be a strategic business partner to an organization and the role that finance can play.
I thought it was a perfect example of the transformation that all of us in finance are trying to do right now. If you look at the basic functions of finance and accounting, I think, and one of the reasons I've been on this soapbox is so many of these basic accounting functions are automated right now that it feels like the robots are coming to take our jobs. Then that is it. But instead of dwelling on that, my focus has been much like what Evan was talking about. Well, if you've automated the kind of mindless work and the data entry and everything that goes into the having to do the monthly close and bank reconciliations and all this sort of core accounting functionality, then that frees up your time for more of exactly what Evan was talking about with, true FP&A, where you're going behind the numbers. You've got that's where your analytics and business intelligence are. And it's about deriving value, I guess, from the numbers that you're reporting, and then taking that data, providing it to the decision makers, not just spitting out a report, but the detail behind it. So, you've got the foundational budgeting task that goes into FP&A, and then your performance tracking, the KPIs that we talked about, and then the modeling that you do and the stress testing and changing the macro and micro variables and all that. And when you have time to focus on these, you can really start adding the value. And I think that's exactly what Evan was talking about. And with even since then, since his stint at Salesforce, the tools and technologies and skills that are out there are just getting better and better and making FP&A more and more powerful. I think there's a term I heard recently called XP&A. This is extended planning and analysis. And that's where exactly what Evan was talking about. The term is new to me, but Evan obviously did this a while back. But this is where you're partnering with operations, or you're partnering with sales and marketing, with service delivery, whomever in the company, and you're helping them. You're to them being that sage that's helping them make these data-driven decisions. So, I mean, and with Evan, we're seeing this real theme between so great clips that you picked, by the way. These all go together so well. But the theme of the show today is, this is what strategic finance is. It's not just, I don't know, okay, well, here we're going to do the budget, and let's try to stick to the budget this year. And I always think of the old, it's not the CFO, it's the CF no, because every time you go to try to get something approved, the answer is no, it's not in the budget, it's not. But it's about really being that partner. So if somebody comes to you with something, a project that maybe wasn't budgeted, it's where you're that partner and you say, well, let's look at the ROI on this. Let's find, if it makes sense, let's find a way. Let's see what the payback is. And if it makes, let's get the data behind this. So even if we didn't think of this back in November when we were putting the budget together, if it makes sense to do now, let's not just be married to, it goes back to the lagging indicators. Let's not just be married to what we thought 7 months ago. We're going to focus on this now. So hearing what he talked about, and that sounds like a true success story. And one thing I have to say here, for him to succeed, it's a testament to his vision and his abilities. And like he said, the team under him and around him. But for that to really work, you have to have full corporate buy-in of the full executive team. Because if you don't have their support, then you're just shouting into a void. And it sounded like he was able to drive it where everyone in the company got on board, and there was real value that came out of what he did. So I loved that story, and it's one of those things. It's like watching a great football performance or something by a team that you like. It's like, yeah, he's killing it out there. And I love to hear that, and you love hearing those success stories, and it speaks to the potential value in finance departments if they're focused right and they have the partnership of the full leadership team.
Yeah, and again, he made an 11-year investment, I think, at Salesforce. Where, given the caliber of executive, part of our discussions at CFO Thought Leader, trying to discover why executives succeed. It takes more than smarts and emotional intelligence. It takes you have to arrive at the right place and time. You have to be given a wide berth sometimes, and sometimes not. Sometimes you need the close collaboration of others. All different circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. And to me, the commonality across them is obviously talking about the data, and the data helping to determine what the levers are that can drive financial results and operational results even, and so forth. But you have to understand your data and be able to use it as a lever. But I guess the other part of that is, if you think about what each of them discussed, it's a data culture that each of them was driving. So with Anat talking about leading versus lagging indicators and the value of being able to find these leading indicators, everybody has to be on board and say, okay, this is happening, and this is not driving, looking in the rearview mirror, it's looking forward, and we're able to be more predictive. And then with Evan, it's about using that data to build better models, to partner with the rest of the executives so that they could more strategically use the data that they have. And then on Amberines, it was the how to sort of build that data culture and have everyone speaking the same language. So it's really, I mean, you could see if you had those three in a room as a think tank, you could see what they would come up with, and all these sort of gel together. So it was, I thought, just a perfect combo of these three clips.
Agreed. However, we'll let Amberine title the episode with her phrase, legibility and levers. I can't resist. But Glenn, thank you for participating with us and helping us out here. Really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, Jack.